I grew up in a parish named for St. Luke the evangelist, so I have a particular fondness for this gospel. I like all of them, but a particular fondness for this gospel because I was raised in a parish under the patronage of St. Luke. And so, for me at least, I have a particular fondness for the fact that there are many things in the Gospel of Luke that are unique to that gospel, but are among the most classic stories that we find among the Gospels and in all the Scriptures. For example, Luke gives the longest account of the infancy of Jesus and his birth, which includes the Annunciation to the Blessed Virgin Mary, the appearance of the angels to the shepherds, the journey to Bethlehem, the presentation of Jesus in the temple, and the finding of Jesus in the temple are all found only in Luke. I am fond of the fact that there are certain stories and parables that are only found in this gospel. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, the raising of the widow's son from the dead, the curing of not just one leper, but of 10 lepers are found only in the Gospel of Luke. Luke is the only gospel in which Jesus says from the cross, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." And to the good thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And upon his resurrection, Luke is the only gospel that tells the story of his appearance to the two men on the road to Emmaus. And he's the only gospel that has a sequel in the Acts of the Apostles. One notable feature of the Gospel of Luke is that he gives the most compassionate presentation of Jesus of the four Gospels. Not that he's not compassionate in Matthew, Mark, and John, but in Luke he is particularly noted for being a very compassionate, always empathizing with those he serves. However, at the same time, Luke is also the Gospel in which Jesus doesn't hold back and pulls no punches. Compassionate, but also very hard-hitting in many places. And we hear an example of that in today's gospel. We're familiar with the Beatitudes of Jesus, but we're familiar with Matthew's version of those Beatitudes that kicks off the Sermon on the Mount, in which Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven." But today's gospel from Luke gives a different take on the Beatitudes of Jesus. He doesn't give simply 8 Beatitudes as Matthew does, but he gives 4 Beatitudes and 4 woes, 4 blessings and 4 curses. A little harsh for a gospel that's known for being compassionate. Jesus doesn't say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." He says, "Blessed are you who are poor. Woe to you who are rich. Blessed are you who mourn. Woe to you who laugh. Blessed are you who are hungry. Woe to you who are full. Blessed are you when they speak ill of you. Woe to you when people speak well of you." There is no room for any equivocation or reading between the lines. And I have to admit, as a priest, there is the great temptation to take Luke's Beatitudes and in preaching them kind of gloss over the fact that we don't include the words in spirit, but that's what Jesus really meant. But is that what Luke meant in presenting this teaching of Jesus? This isn't the only place in which we hear a very harsh presentation by Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. We love to refer to Jesus as the Prince of Peace. But in Luke, he says, "Do you think I've come for peace? I've come for the sword. I've come to light a fire on the earth, and I wish it were already blazing." This is the gospel in which in another place, Jesus says, "After you have done everything you have been commanded to do, declare yourself to be worthless servants because you've only fulfilled your obligations. This is the gospel in which Jesus tells a parable of about a man who was beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. And the hero of the story is a Samaritan. Perhaps culturally that's lost to us. But at the end of that story, the result might have been that some parents might decide they don't want their children listening to any more of Jesus' stories because the Jewish people hated the Samaritans. There was nothing good about the Samaritans. And as John reminds us, the Jewish people held nothing in common with Samaritans. And yet, Jesus is holding up a Samaritan as the hero of a story that tells us, in answer to the question, who is my neighbor? And even in answering that question, the answer does not come, oh, the Samaritan, but perhaps with clenched teeth, the one who was kind to him and treated him with kindness. In many different places, Luke really gives us pause, really gets us thinking. Because if there's one thing Jesus does not want us to fall into, is a sense of complacency and a sense of assurance. When one is rich, one becomes comfortable. One becomes assured. One can become complacent. And it was revolutionary when in another part of the gospel, Jesus says how hard it is for the wealthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. The apostles didn't know what to do with that because it was understood that the wealthy were blessed. But Jesus turns that notion on its ear. When one is happy, when one is joyful, it is easy for one to grow self-assured and to grow complacent and to grow lax in the obligations of our faith. When one is hungry, it's easy to grow comfortable and assured. When one is full. But when one is hungry, that's when one perhaps turns more to praying to God that things go better. I recall 20 years ago, after the terrible attack on 9/11, in the 2 or 3 weeks following, our churches were full, packed to the gills with people coming to pray and worship because we were enduring such a terrible tragedy, a terrible attack, and a national feeling of doubt with regard to our safety. But prior to that, and as the years have piled up since, we do see the numbers diminish because it is so easy for any of us to grow in our complacency. But Jesus doesn't want us to fall into that, because it is when we are at our most complacent and our most self-assured that we perhaps have the most rude awakening, the rudest awakening awaiting us. And there's where in the Gospel of Luke, out of his intense compassion that Jesus shows, he loves us too much to be anything less than brutally honest. And in the end, there's only one place in the Gospel of Luke where Jesus gives anyone any assurance, and that is to the good thief on the cross, a man who has not much life left lived to be complacent and to blow it. Jesus says to him, only today you'll be with me in paradise. Anywhere else, Jesus challenges us not to fall into complacency, not to fall into an unhealthy self-assurance. Because when we do, that is when Jesus will give us that proverbial good swift kick in the pants. And not tell us, blessed are the poor in spirit. He'll say, blessed are the poor. Be warned, those who are rich. He won't say, you've done a great job, you're fulfilling all the commands. He'll want us to go that extra mile and do even more and tell us, after you've done all you've been commanded, don't be satisfied with that because you've only fulfilled your obligations. And when we grow complacent in terms of our own faith, in the midst of a mission that Jesus has given us to evangelize, spread that faith, Jesus reminds us of the words of Simeon at the presentation, found only in the Gospel of Luke, when he says to Mary, "You will be pierced by a sword, because this child will be the downfall and the rise and a great upheaval everywhere, but especially in the kingdom of Israel." He reminds us of those words when he says, "I did not come for peace. I came to light a fire on the earth." But he begins with these simple words in today's gospel. Not the Beatitudes we're used to hearing and celebrating, but Beatitudes that nonetheless give us pause. Hopefully cause a little bit of reflection as to where we fit in these Beatitudes and these woes. We may be rich, but are we falling into complacency? We may be full, but are we self-assured? We may be happy, we may be joyful. This is what our gospel calls us to. But is that joy causing us to neglect the commission, the mission, the obligations we've been given as followers of Christ, to the point that we actually forget our call and fall into a complacency? Do we get overly discouraged when people speak badly of us because of the faith that we profess, to the point that we downplay it, de-emphasize it in our dealings with one another? Let us hear the compassionate Jesus in today's gospel, a Jesus who loves us so much that he will not be anything less than fully honest with us. Let us reflect on how we fit in these Beatitudes, not poor in spirit, but poor as opposed to rich, but not cursed simply because we are poor, or rich and blessed simply because we are poor. But what effect is that having on the call we have received from Jesus to be his faithful followers? And let us see Christ's warning and his gentle but firm guidance of us away from a sense of complacency, so that we can be those true, substantial, and faithful followers of Christ that he has called us to be. He who has called us, let us truly follow in the honesty, the substance, and the truth that Jesus gives us as our shepherd to his sheep.